Erica Gifford Mills has written the book that is about to change your life. If you yearn to branch out, to take a leap of faith, to love yourself and others fully, and to finally let go of whatever no longer serves you, then Erica's book, The Rooted Life, Live, Love, Let Go, is for you. Readers will learn about how their values affect every aspect of their lives, why self-care and self-love is a critical first step to stopping limiting beliefs and negative thoughts in their tracks. The Rooted Life, Live, Love, Let Go teaches readers who are ready to unlearn unhealthy patterns to set, communicate, and keep their boundaries, to live with passion on purpose, and to create goals with the intention of putting them into action. Once you pick up your own copy along with the companion workbook, you'll be one step closer to being fully equipped, empowered, and enlightened on your path to be.
Something is shifting. What we were told was permanent is being questioned in real time. This is not simply chaos, it's an inflection point, or perhaps more precisely, a rupture. A rupture not chosen, but triggered. The point, however, is not the trigger. The point is our response. A moment when the future can bend toward what we choose to rethink and rebuild. But we cannot reimagine society without first reimagining ourselves. Remember this. Every system reflects the beliefs of the society that created it. Welcome to Inflection Point Podcast, where Reimagine We begins with Reimagine Me. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Inflection Podcast. We created this space for reflections and reflective conversations about personal empowerment, community engagement, and cooperation. So in these reflective conversations, we think together in real time, explore meaning, experience, and ideas with curiosity without trying to persuade or perform. Here, we don't just talk about the world. We examine the ways that we are being formed by the world and how together we can reimagine it. So I'm your host, Anita Russell, and this is Reimagine We. And here's a quick hello from our co-host, Gail Hunter. I still have Mavis on my mind.
Hi, I'm Gail Hunter, and welcome to our program this evening.
Excellent, excellent. So before we jump into this, the discussion for this episode, I'd like to give a quick shout out for Women's History Month. There's a woman that I've been following. Just very recently, I started following her on a regular basis. Her name is Sandra Bebu Boateng. She is a media entrepreneur, a global strategist, and a convener focused on the intersection of Africa, the African diaspora, and global power. Sandra is also the co-founder of Panagenius, a global media company and experiential environment that connects people, brands, and ideas through culture. She stands on a platform of power, promise, and path forward. So I see some alignment between the work that she's doing and the work that we're doing here. She does it on a much bigger and much global scale, and so her work informs my work in a lot of instances. So I just wanted to give that quick shout out to her. So let's get started on today's topic. Reimagine We is not just a philosophy. It's a brand, or not even a brand, or not even a framework. It represents an evolutionary process towards empowerment. Most empowerment models start with confidence. Reimagine We starts with awareness of inner formation. We recognize that people often try to change systems without understanding the psychological and moral architecture that created that system. So at Reimagine we treat empowerment as human development, not just about motivation or self-improvement. And that development always unfolds in stages. So what we are not is a political ideology. We are not a self-help motivation platform. We are not a social justice club. It is a worldview formation process. So Gail and I are going to walk through some conversation to kind of dig a little bit deeper into what in the world is that, this worldview formation cycle. And so our entire point here is to help our listeners understand that the worldview formation cycle is how we interpret reality. It's how we live in that reality, and how do we shape society. So I think of it like this: my words, actions, and behaviors are not random. They are sort of this downstream of inner worldview that has framed my thoughts, beliefs, and ideas. So my inner worldview kind of shapes how I interpret reality, how I value myself and others, and how I decide what is possible. So my inner worldview shows up in my words, my actions, and my behaviors. So Gail, you're shaking your head. Tell me, when you hear that, how does that resonate with you in terms of that connection between our words, actions, behaviors, and how it shows up in our words? I'm sorry, how it shows up, how we show up in the world, I should say.
Well, I've always looked at it more, labeled as more as our beliefs, but it's the same thing. It's the beliefs that come from different places, different imprints that happen to us, and that create the worldview, our worldview, right? But our beliefs always will create our thoughts, which create our feelings, and that creates our behavior. And so I'm always connected to that process, and it is a process. So if we want to change anything in the present, we want to change a behavior or even a thought or feeling, we have to change that perception, that belief system, that worldview system, whatever that you want to reference it as. But it must be changed first.
Excellent, excellent. It kind of lines up with the book that I had written, Cultivating Change from the Inside Out, because everything starts internally and then starts to flow out into the world. So one of the, and in that process, there's this idea that to a certain extent we are conditioned. We're conditioned by our environment. We're conditioned by all kinds of things that impact us. So we kind of start our life off absorbing narratives and absorbing those narratives as sources of formation, who we are, where do we come from, and what is it that matters in life. So we also experience shifts in our worldview as we experience life on a daily basis. And that experience is sort of enfolded in family stories, culture and historical roots, media exposure, our own identity and self-concept, fear, trauma experiences that we have, and also our education. And so all of these things sort of come together in terms of molding how we begin. And I'm looking at this sort of from the standpoint of when we are growing, when we are in our childhood, and all of these different experiences that we're having that over the course of time are shaping us, right? So I want to give a quick example of how that shift in worldview can occur even as we're young children and as we're growing up. So there's a experience that I've read that Martin Luther King Jr. had as a child, as a 6-year-old child. And this experience kind of represents what we're talking about with this shift in worldview. So he started off with this childhood friend, right? So at the age of 6, he had a very close friend with a white boy who lived nearby. They played together on a regular basis. They enjoyed their childhood together without any awareness of any racial divisions. And then something shifted in the nation, and that shift came about as a result of the creation of Jim Crow laws, right? So if you could imagine Martin Luther King having this really good friend, they're just hanging out on a regular basis. These Jim Crow laws get enacted, and all of a sudden there's a change in how he and this friend are allowed by law to interact with one another. So the friendship changed abruptly when the boy's father forbade them from playing together. The father stated, "We are white and you are colored." And this was kind of highlighting the harsh realities of segregation under Jim Crow laws. So this moment was pivotal for Dr. King as it introduced him to the concept as a 6-year-old of racial discrimination. And then there were the family conversations. So now there's been this shift, and now the family needs to have a conversation to kind of help little Martin understand what was happening. So Martin Luther King shared his experience with his parents, and they explained the history of slavery and racism in America. His mother and father emphasized the importance of love and understanding despite the hatred that he might have felt, right? This early lesson helped to shape his future commitment to nonviolence and equality, influencing his lifelong dedication to civil rights. So the whole entire point is that he had an experience that reshaped his worldview. And I know we all can think of those types of experiences that we've had where where our worldview was shaped in one way or another. So Gail and I are going to share our own personal story of a worldview shift. So I'm going to shift the conversation over to Gail, and she can share her experience, and then I'll share my own.
Okay. So a bit of a backstory. When I was 4, my family moved from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh, and they moved to a small town outside of Pittsburgh that is a fairly, at current time, this is in the 50s, but currently it's a very upper class income town. But at that time it wasn't. It was pretty diversified. And it was also diversified culturally and socially. And I went to the public school, so there were children there that skin was white and skin was brown, skin was darker than brown, and everything in between. So I grew up with that. But at 14, my parents decided the house that we lived in was too big, and because my sister and brother went away to school and on their own. And so they moved me to a township called Peters Township in the South Hills area of the city. Now, this was a area at that time in the 60s, probably like 65. I would have been 14. And that was just getting developed. And so they're developing these plans, and these big, very nice homes were being built. And most of the people that went to school itself, I think there were 200 kids in my graduating class, so it was small. It was just starting to get developed. And then eventually, right now, it probably looks extremely congested, and it's very, very developed. But back then, there's still farms and so forth. But when I was in when I was in 8th grade, there was a family that moved into this area that was Black, and somebody burned a cross. And nobody said anything to me about it. I was shocked. I was angry. I was probably scared. It didn't make sense. Why in the world would they do this? What was the height of the civil rights movement, right? And so this was a all white neighborhood, all white community. And somebody actually burned a cross, and nobody did anything. Nobody talked about it. I don't think they even found people that did it. And I can remember all of a sudden feeling very alone. Because nobody felt the way that I did. I mean, I was really angry that this happened, and I didn't understand. It didn't make sense to me. And so that caused me to feel very different than everybody else there. And it also awakened me to prejudice and to racism, that I really hadn't been exposed to before. I mean, when I was a child in the other town that we grew up in, there was a section in that town that there were a lot of Black people that lived there. And I can remember once my mother saying to me, the street was actually parallel to the main street. And I had a long ways to walk home because I lived right on the border of that town. And she said that she didn't want me walking that street. And I couldn't understand why, because it didn't make any sense. I liked actually the street. The houses were nice, people were friendly. And so I would walk down that street, and then I'd cut back over to the main street further down. Now these houses are selling for $500,000. So I want you to put that in perspective, right? So moving to this other town, and it's actually in Washington County, it was like a culture shock. And I felt the aloneness is probably the most significant thing that I felt, and the racism. I had nobody to talk to about it. My parents didn't want to talk about it. That was their MO, right? Just push it on the rug and don't look at it, don't talk about it. However, when I finally got out of high school there and I went to college, that was in 69, 70, my entire life changed. So not only did I became a hippie, but I demonstrated against the war, but I also demonstrated for the civil rights. And there's a Black Panther group that I went to, and I mean different things and we demonstrated for feminism and a variety of different things. And so finally I felt a place that I could be where other people shared my feelings and shared my thoughts. And I felt a connection there, which I think is important. And so it allowed me to shift my belief system from I feel this isolation aloneness to no, I'm not alone. Yeah, this isn't okay, what's going on here. And so it really helped heal those younger wounds that I experienced when I was 14 or 15.
Excellent, Gail. Thank you for sharing such a personal story. Yeah, and I can definitely appreciate everything that you said. And there are elements of your story that kind of parallel my story as well. So for me, it was when a major shift for me happened when I was about 14 years old. And there was a merger. So I grew up in a small town called Homestead, right? And there were 3 towns that were kind of all very, very close to one another. In some instances, you just go across the street and you're in the other town. But each one of those small towns had their own school district. So in leading up to 1972 and the birth of the Still Valley School District, so if you're familiar with the city of Pittsburgh, you probably have heard of the Still Valley School District. So I grew up in the Homestead School District from kindergarten up to 8th grade. And I loved my school. I loved the community that I lived in. I mean, kind of like some of what Gail was expressing. I loved the fact that my teachers, I had teachers that lived in my neighborhood. The principal lived across the street from the school. And it just was a very, from my view anyway, as a kid, it was a nurturing environment. I had great friends and all of that. But then in 1972, in the fall of 1972, is when, we started going into this new environment. And it was very tough. So this is sort of my desegregation story, right? Although that desegregation really did not help me in terms of my personal development as a kid and all of that. So I all of a sudden found myself from being in one educational environment, which to me was very nurturing, in this other educational environment where in my my own environment, I just grew up as Anita. But then when I moved over to Still Valley, now I'm one of the Black kids, right? So there was a different way that my identity was even reconstructed, not by my own hands, but because I'm now in this environment. And in that environment, we had a lot of problems in that very first year. There were fights. I remember our towns being on lockdown, on curfew, and all of that. Like, for the first time in my life, I couldn't walk around in my own town because of like threats. We had bomb threats. We're going to blow up the school because we don't want those Black kids in the school with our white kids. And all of that. I'm literally like 14 years old, right? And it was a very, very dramatic period of time for me. And the thing that shifted for me the most was the realization that there are people out there who hate me and will threaten me because of the color of my skin. And that realization also got embedded in how education is delivered under these types of circumstances. And I was in a physics class. Now, I was always like that kid that was taking all the science classes and the math because I knew I wanted to go and be a research scientist or go to medical school and all of that. And so I was used to taking, just really getting into the science classes. And my teacher, I just remember sitting in the classroom and discussing a particular physics topic. And my teacher was asking questions, and I raised my hand because I knew the answer. And my teacher completely ignored me. I had never had that experience before. So my shift came in recognizing the fact that even though I define myself as just Anita, I'm now in an environment where people are defining me along racial lines and racial terms, and the way that they're interacting with me is along racial lines. And so it was a very, very powerful moment for me in terms of shifting my worldview, because I walked away. Like one particular time there was a bomb threat and we were literally sitting out on the lawn, and I'm thinking to myself, people actually called in that they're going to blow up the school because I'm there, because my presence is there. So it started to help me to redefine myself and be able to see myself within a broader context, and all of that. And it was just a very defining moment for me. And it was that moment, like Dr. King, that you realize, hey, you're Black. And there are certain things that you're now going to have to deal with in the world because you're Black, and all of that. So when I think about Gail's and my story, there are like some components there that I'd like to kind of move into and talk about a little bit. First of all, is we each have a core story, right? And that's kind of our narrative. And it was that thing of leading up to who we were in that moment. Where did we come from? What were the things that mattered to us? And then there were the questions. We both experienced something. Now we're asking questions. So the questions were around things like truth, purpose, destiny, meaning. Like, what does it mean now that I'm in this desegregated situation? Like, what does that mean for me now in terms of how I live my life as a 14-year-old kid on a daily basis? And Gail, I'm sure you probably had those same types of experiences. Like, my core story was this thing, and then all of a sudden I got shifted into a different thing. Now I have all these questions. So, Gail, what were some of the questions that you were asking?
Well, I felt like an alien. I mean, I felt like there wasn't anybody I could really talk to, and so it was I felt very alone. It just didn't make sense. I always try to look for what makes sense, right? What's just and what is just, and it never felt that way. Yet there was nobody there that was agreeing with me or it's not that they were overtly saying, yeah, I'm glad that they burned the cross, but there was silence. It was the passive kind of silence that was devastating, right? That can say something in the words of silence, right?
Exactly. So for me, it shaped my perception also along the lines of my identity, which is one of the things that I had talked about. And it also, like when I was in Homestead School District, we had like a mixture. We had white kids, we had Black kids, we had Hispanic kids, and all of that. But then when we got into this different environment, it also created a gulf between the white kids that I had grown up with and had been friends with. So that shift was very dramatic, but it also at the same time pulled the Black kids together in a much stronger, more like community type of thing. Because now it's like we have to go to school, we have to watch our backs, we got to not only watch my back, but I'm going to watch my friend's back over there. So it became a very different type of environment than we had originally. And so the experiences that we had, the fighting and, you know, the bomb threats, and we were learning lessons along the way. And all of those lessons were molding us in terms of how we see ourselves. Right?
You were also reacting to trauma. I mean, you were hyper vigilant, and you're describing all the different aspects of a reaction to trauma, because that had to be what you felt. It felt traumatizing, what you were experiencing. You know?
Very much so.
Very much so. Yeah.
And just having a different relationship with teachers was new to me as well. Like I said, I grew up in a community where we had teachers that lived right in our community. The principal lived like 5 minutes from the school, and it was just a different, wholly different type of experience once the merger came, and it divided. You think like doing something like that, the intention is not to divide. The intention is to bring together, but all it really did was divide us. And not only was it in my class, but I had two brothers that were coming up behind me. So my class was that year in 1972, we were going from 8th grade into 9th grade. So we were the first year's crew of students that were experiencing this new type of environment. But I also had two brothers that were coming up behind me, and the experience was the same for them, probably even more dramatically so because they were Black males as well. And so just looking at and experience that kind of dynamic shift in the social and educational environment, it created a very different worldview for me. And how I started walking through the world became very different.
Well, we are wired to feel safe, right? Where our brain is wired. That's what our whole nervous system is. And you just shifted from feeling safe to not feeling safe at all. That's major. And that's really a major shift in affecting your development.
Exactly. And like I said, it continued over for years. As a matter of fact, there was I don't remember Jerry Dickinson, who was a law professor at the University of Pittsburgh, wrote an article 20 years later about the Steel Valley merger. And in the article, what he revealed was it solved nothing. The original situation was, well, the Black kids aren't performing as well on the standardized test. I was an honor roll student. Standardized test didn't mean anything to me, and I wasn't the only one. But that was the narrative that was being created, is that we weren't doing as well on the standardized testing. And that, from that very rigid standpoint, maybe that was true. But there were so many other things that I had that were of value to me that would not show up on a standardized test.
And they know those tests were biased. They weren't even.
Right. Absolutely.
The testing system was biased.
Absolutely. And in his article, the main point of the article was that the conditions had not changed in terms of the racialized aspect of Steel Valley had not changed. And so it was like one of those experiments where desegregation did not do what it was intended to do. So we're going to take a break right now. And when we come back, we're going to continue this conversation about the worldview of formation. And we're going to continue a little bit in this conversation that Gail and I are engaged in right now to close that out. And then we'll continue with some other things that we want to share with our audience. So we'll see you in a minute or so after the break.
What if your training isn't enough? The Multicultural Mindset Podcast invites counselors and therapists to unlearn the one-size-fits-all approach. This isn't cultural competence. It's a way of being that brings racialized experiences from the margins to the very center of care. Let's stop pathologizing Black pain and start challenging the system that created the bias in the first place. Visit newseasons.training to subscribe.
What if one decision could change everything? Cherise Evans, best-selling author of The Power of One, The 5 Essential Keys to Success, knows that transformation starts within. Let Cherise help you discover your authentic self and live with confidence, purpose, and joy. Whether you're ready to grow your career, your relationships, or your mindset, Cherise can show you how to elevate. Book with her today at shareevans.com. There is more to life than simply surviving or even thriving. There's flourishing. High performance and quantum success coach Beth Larson helps you calibrate and elevate your life. Beth specializes in working with women who want more from their life, more energy, joy, passion, connection, and more meaning. As your coach, she will help you get clear about your life, prioritize what's important, and become a master of your energy. Visit BethLarsonCoaching.com.
Are you ready to break free from self-sabotaging patterns and reclaim your power? I'm Beck Nelson, licensed therapist, spiritual mentor, and psychic medium, helping individuals achieve true personal liberation through my Beckology framework. This step-by-step system shifts your mindset, strengthens your intuition, and empowers lasting change. Work with me through single sessions, 90-day or 6-month programs, or explore my courses, books, and coaching. Visit becknelson.com to get started.
Do you want to become a host? Start your own podcast to inspire, persuade, and influence others on what you're passionate about? At the Transformation Network, we can help make your talk radio dreams happen. Let's take your hopes, dreams, and passions and put them on air today. Email us at host@transformationtalkradio.com to learn more about becoming a host of your very own show.
So welcome back to Inflection Point Podcast as we continue our discussion of empowerment and worldview formation through the lens of the Reimagine We model. So Gail, I'd like to kind of continue our conversation with the stories that we had experienced with our own shift in worldview, and kind of think about it through the lens of things like trust, belonging, meaning, and identity. So talk about those things and how they showed up for you in terms of like your culture, how you visualize life and all of that.
Well, I think the biggest thing is I felt mistrust, right? I felt tremendous mistrust, and it probably affected me throughout high school, among other things too. But that and don't get me wrong, I was pretty engaged in interaction with people, but I never kind of joined a clique, or never kind of was friends with a lot of different people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as I'm looking back, is a level of trust and feeling safe, right? That I didn't feel connected until I hit college, I think. And there are enough people that were believing as I was believing, and I held those same truths and validated who I was, what I've always believed. And so at that point, then I did feel safer. I did feel just a sense of trust and connection. That's really pretty amazing, compared to what I had experienced in high school.
Yeah. Same here. That whole entire experience, it helped me to see myself in a very different kind of way. Because as I said earlier, I just saw myself as Anita until that happened.
Right.
But it also started to, so as a result of that, it helped me to get a lot more empowered in my identity as a Black person living in America and understanding what that actually means. So it started shaping some of the beliefs that I held. some of the values, identity. And one of the things for me, when I think about it from a family perspective, is that my mother was actually an activist. And so, I had that very personal experience, but then I also had this activist mother. And as we were going through a lot of the experiences with being in this new Steel Valley School District, I would talk to my mom and I'd say, Mommy, I think I want to walk out. And we were planning a walkout. I think I want to walk out. My major thing was not so much that I would get in trouble at the school. I just didn't want to get in trouble with my mother. Right. And I remember in that conversation, one of the things that she said to me is that it comes a time when in everybody's life where they have to make a choice of what it is they're willing to stand up for or what are they willing to fight for. So if you walk out of school and you get suspended, what she was essentially saying is that I got your back.
Yeah.
And so we had those types of experiences where we walked out of school, and it just really, again, it really shaped how I saw myself as a Black person, and it deepened my identity in terms of how I saw myself as a Black person, particularly because I just didn't understand, like in the summertime, before I came to Steel Valley, I was this kid, just this kid growing up in Homestead. When I got to Steel Valley, I was still that kid who was growing up in Homestead. So it wasn't me that shifted. It was the environment that I was in. It was the people that I was now connected to. And though that started me thinking in a very different kind of way. And to your point, one of the things that Gail and I have in common is that we both went to the University of Pittsburgh, not at the same time, but I can appreciate what you're saying when you say when you get to college and being in that college environment, now you're seeing people that align with who you are, people that you can identify with and all of that. And that was definitely my experience. And also at that time, because there were so many other things that were kind of going on at that time period. The university was changing. They was just starting to introduce the Black Studies department. And we had, Dr. Curtis Porter and the Black consciousness classes and all of that. So I oftentimes look at my college years, not just simply in terms of my intellectual development and, going to classes and studying and all of that, but also my identity really got shaped to a great deal when I was in college. And again, with my mom being an activist, so I had that in me. And so when we're at college and we're protesting because they want to fire the Black professor and all of that, it was not even an issue for me to raise up my hand. And so I can see over the course of time how my identity became very different, right? And you start kind of looking at things within the context of society, the larger society, community, justice, conflict, cohesion, standing up, all of those things that for me were rooted in the fact that I had that desegregation experience.
Right. Yeah. And so I would think that would have felt like some form of trauma. And what I experienced was a very quiet, passive kind, right? Because my parents had racist beliefs that were generationally there, but they were very quiet and respectful about it, right? I had an older sister that was not, but my parents were. And so, but that left me not being able to really talk to them. So I didn't feel that. And I wouldn't talk to my older sister, because she was so overtly racist. So there was that aloneness, and it just was amazing going to school and finally feeling the connection with people, of different color people that were of similar beliefs that what I had, and it solidified my connection to myself. You know, yeah.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that's amazing about this conversation that we're having is that I'm a Black woman and you're a white woman, and we can sit down and share those types of experiences that shaped us and look at what are some of those things that are in common in terms of the way that we got shaped. So that's something that I really appreciate. And I think if there were more people who were able to have these types of conversations across these
Be the goal, right? Yes.
yeah,
That's exactly
it could potentially make such a big difference.
it really would. That is exactly what needs to happen, is that people need to listen and have a conversation. And where they say anything, they need to hear what the other person's saying and let them know what they hear. They understand.
Yes.
Communication.
So one of the things I want our audience to walk away with is this idea that worldview is like this invisible architecture that produces your identity, right? And some of the things that we talked about, these internal things, these external things, and all of that, but they all have the potential to contribute to who you are evolving into as you're growing up. And even like once you are a grown up, you still, so, I look at worldview formation as this cycle, right? And so you kind of like go through some of the things that we just talked about. And, but over the course of your life, the cycle continues either consciously or unconsciously, and is showing up in your actions, habits, policies, relationships, institutions as you're getting older and your world is expanding. So you go through these moments where you're redefining or reformatting or reforming your worldview. So your worldview is not simply what you say you believe. It's also what your life consistently assumes is true about reality, people, power, and purpose. So when I went to Still Valley, people assumed things about me to be true because I was a Black kid, right? And so it's also reflected in how do you show up? Like, especially now, having all of these experiences, and I'm like 69 years old almost. I will be 69 years old my birthday. And when I think about my own worldview evolution over the course of time and the different things that impacted me, like when I went to Africa, I've been to Africa twice, and I didn't go there as a tourist. I went there to work. I went there to help people. I went there to be with people, to kind of and it gave me a stronger sense of my own identity being on African soil. And so I challenge our audience to kind of think about these types of questions. Who do you show up as? How do you show up? Go ahead, Gail.
When you look at racism, no one was born racist.
Right, exactly.
You're not going to pick up an infant anywhere and say this baby is already thinking that. Of course not, because it's all the imprints from the beliefs and that's been passed on that continue being carried. But it's important that we each look in that mirror and say, who am I? What do I believe? What do I hold connection to? And who do I show up as you said? How do I show up?
Exactly. Yeah. And when you show up, what are you representing when you show up? Or who are you representing? Or what ideology are you representing when you show up?
And is it in direct lineage with who you are, who you believe?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And when you go through this process of examining how you show up or who you show up as, there's another fundamental question, like, why do you show up as you do? Like when I think about like Christian nationalism, or when I think about white supremacy, it's kind of like why do you show up the way that you do? And whether or not people actually examine that and really dig into it to have that sort of critical self-reflection moment. Why do I show up like this? Right? And I can remember, I've shared this story multiple times with Gail. The first time I had gotten invited to Gail's organization. She has an organization called OMA Pittsburgh, right? And this was at the time when I first moved back to Pittsburgh after living in the New Jersey, New York area for about 30 years or so. And then I found myself back in Pittsburgh and I was looking for connections. I had family here, but I didn't have any friends, because I was gone for so long. And Gail's organization is one of the organizations that I ended up connecting to because my rationale was, well, you always do and have done well in working with nonprofit organizations. So identify some nonprofit organizations in the city of Pittsburgh, and there you go. And Gail's organization was literally the first one that I had gotten introduced to. And I got introduced to it through an Uber driver who happened to be a member of Gail's organization. And we got to talking, and she invited me to an event that OMA was hosting. And I decided to go. Now, when I got there, and the place was beautiful, oh my gosh, the space was amazing and all of that. And when I got there and I walked in, I realized you're the only Black person in the room. And so in that realization, I had to make a choice. Like, okay, how am I going to show up in this space? And what I decided to do was that I'm just going to show up in my humanity of who I am as a human being. And I'm just going to see how it goes. So I'd say within about no more than 10 minutes, I didn't even have to think like that anymore because I felt, I'm going to use this word, I felt like I was in a safe environment where I could literally just show up as Anita. And that was the first night that I met Gail Henderson. I'm sorry, you're not Gail Henderson. I have another friend of mine named Gail Hunter. And it was a wonderful experience. And this was in 2017, 18. It's now 2020, 26. And Gail and I are still friends. And we can do this type of work together. That's pretty amazing, I think.
Well, and for Oma, it was one of the basic values was that we are open and we are here, and if you don't share that value, that worldview, as you said, that it probably would not click, it wouldn't work. We are, because we're basing it in humanity and open to humanity.
Exactly. So in that situation, there was two dynamics that were at work. The first dynamic was me as a Black person walking into this space. But the second dynamic was the white folks that were in there receiving the Black person who had just walked into his space. And it was that interaction, or that catalyst, if you will, that sparked a friendship that still exists to this day. And I say all of that to say, people out there who believe that there's no way that Black can live with white and make it be an incredible, empowering experience, I beg to differ.
Yeah, me too.
Because Gail and I represent something that doesn't even fall into that category.
Right.
And it's something that I've appreciated all of these years.
As I have too.
Yeah. So we are literally sort of winding down, and I wanted to share some episode resources that we have, because as this conversation begins to grow throughout the rest of the year, I really would like our audience to have the opportunity to kind of participate in the conversation. Obviously, we don't have people call in or anything like that. But one of the things that we started to introduce was something that I call reflection ethos. And basically what that is a follow-up to our episodes that allow our audience to kind of contribute to the Reimagine We journey, their own Reimagine We journey. And so if you, to our listeners, if you go onto the page where the description is for this particular episode, there's an area in there called giveaways. And those giveaways are where we have resources that are there. And so a lot of times if we mention something here, if we mention, or if we have a guest, we'll have information on the guest. So I just want our audience to understand that we're working towards making it possible for you to interact with us, because I really want to know what people are thinking as they receive this information, and as we talk more and more about this worldview creation, or this worldview formation cycle that we all go through, right? And so that's the first one. It's what I call reflection ethos. And it's as I mentioned, it's a follow-up to each episode. We will have that, and then people can kind of answer and share. I mean, you share those, you answer the questions yourself, but then you can also come back onto our Inflection Point podcast site and share your comments. What were some of the things that maybe went off for you? What was a light bulb for you, or what may have triggered a memory in you in terms of what your own shift in your worldview may have looked like as you were coming along in your life? So that's number one. And then the second one is an invitation to a complimentary 3-hour midweek intensive. And this is happening on Thursday, March 26th from 6 to 9 p.m. And this will be a Zoom session. And it's based on the 6 keys to nurture, grow, and empower your life, which is connected directly to cultivating change from the inside out. All of the conversation that we're having about how you have to be willing to examine your inner environment in order to figure out, how am I showing up in the world? How are people receiving me? How am I receiving other people? And this essentially is a prelude to a 12-month Reimagine We Empowerment Lab that I will be launching in the spring of 2026. The space is limited to 20 participants, so please get on there so that you can get your spot and get registered. And then lastly, I'd like to mention the work of Sandra Baby Bonte that I had mentioned earlier, and her program is called Panagenius. So I really want you to kind of go and pay attention to what she's doing. A lot of the work that she does actually informs the work that I do. And I'm very grateful to have that as a resource. So those are just some of the resources. These are some of the ways that we want to start interacting more with our audience and getting feedback and all of that. So Gail, we're getting close. We have about 7 more minutes left to go. So your comments about this particular episode or going forward?
No, it's exciting. I think that no matter how old we are, we all have the ability to change and to grow, right? And so, but we have to look within ourselves first to be able to find what that is and what our beliefs really are in order to shift them and change them. And it's a process, and it's an incredibly valuable process, because when one person grows, it affects everybody around them. And so if we, as a collective humanity, we all have the capacity to create a shift and a difference.
Exactly. And I think one of the really important aspects of the whole Reimagine We platform is that it's not us telling people or directing people, this is what you should do, this is how you should think, this is what you should think, and all of that. It's really an exploration into yourself,
Right.
and really getting an understanding of who you are. How do you walk through the world? How do people respond to you when you walk through the world, and all of that? And so this whole idea of worldview is the theme for this year. And so we'll be spending a lot of time talking about worldview, but not just Gail and I talking about amongst ourselves. Our intention is to have guests that come on that kind of fit within the context or can relate to or connect to what it is we're talking about. So I'm looking definitely for guests that would be interested in being on our show. And I just realized I meant to put in our area for resources. I'm going to have to go back and add that because I wanted to add a guest inquiry form. And so that'll be a place where people can go and just kind of, it's just a quick, maybe a 5-minute form. We just want to get a sense of, if you are interested in being a guest on our show, a sense of where you're coming from, because this is not a debate platform. This is an information platform. It's a formation platform. So I set up the inquiry so that people have a very strong understanding of what our show is intended to be about. It's not intended to be controversial or debating or anything like that. It's really intended for people to kind of get that stronger sense of what worldview is, how we operate, how it shows up, because it's there. It is absolutely there. So I'm going to close out now with these final words that I'd like to share. And so if you think of Reimagine We as co-creating culture and society, that's how I think about it. The cause of freedom is not the cause of a race or a sect, a party or a class. It is the cause of humankind. And this is a quote from a woman by the name of Anna Julia Cooper. This quote it was in 1892 when she made this particular quote. She's an African-American author, educator, and activist. And so the bottom line is, worldviews don't just shape how we see the world. They shape the world that we build for one another. So it's a different way of sort of starting to look at things, starting off with looking at yourself, that your own critical self-reflection and that. So I'm hoping that you will continue to join with us and be a part of the conversation. We are here on Transformation Talk Radio and the Transformation Network every first and third Wednesday of the month at 3 p.m. Pacific time, 6 p.m. Eastern time. Gail and I are here, and we have a new exciting topics every time we get together. So don't forget to register for the complimentary 3-hour midweek intensive. That's Thursday, March 26th on Zoom. And you can get the Reflection Ethos, which is that episode specific resource, and discover the voice of the woman that we highlighted for Women's History Month. So I think at this point, we'll sign off, and we'll see you next time on Inflection Point Podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Inflection Point Podcast on the Transformation Network. To discover more about the Reimagine We platform, subscribe on Substack at anitadrussell.substack.com.